got some feedback there. Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments on our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 195, The Mithraic Mysteries. You know me. My name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. And we have a shorter crew tonight. Not quite a skeleton crew, but next up is Robert Johnson. Introduce yourself, please.
Hey guys, RJ, Robert Johnson, Waukegan Lodge 78, past master there, current sitting secretary. And that's it. All right.
Word.
Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. Juan Sepulveda.
I'm Juan.
Thanks, Juan.
Juan Sepulveda from Orange Blossom Lodge in Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
Thank you. All right. Jason Richards.
Everybody is having trouble talking tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I blame New Year's. Jason Richards, past master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C. And we named this episode the Mithraic Mysteries because if we use the word cult, all of the trolls are going to come out.
Ah, good point. Good point. Throw a couple of Albert Pikes in there, a little bit of Joseph Wage's Illuminati, and we're good to go. Let's see. First up, Happy New Year, everyone. Hope everyone had a good time. Looks like everyone survived for the most part. And first up for Masonic news, as a reminder, this year is the 300th anniversary of the formation of the premier Grand Lodge of England. And to celebrate that, you too can have your very own copy of the TMR 300 Celebration Commemorative Patent produced and designed by artist Ryan J. Flynn. Own a piece of history and head on over to thewindingstairs.com and get your own copy for only 300 dimes.
For the brothers that have been, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The brothers that have already placed their orders, the first prints should be shipping out next week. So we can't wait to see pictures on our page when you receive it.
And while you're over at freemasonryart.com, go ahead and pick up a TMR t-shirt because you know you want one.
It is one of my favorite t-shirts. It's not
amazing.
just because I'm biased. It's actually a really good design. Let's see. Next up, we are coming close to AMD / other body Masonic Week here in the Washington, D.C. metro area. That's right. The 2018 Masonic Week will be held February 8th to 11th. That's a Thursday through Sunday, and it is not on Valentine's Day this year. And I know that
they have events for ladies.
Ooh, that
I can't think of any women who would want to go.
that would actually. There's a dinner.
That's like most ladies' Masonic events.
Yes.
Like, no, honey, you don't want to go.
It's not even that. It's more like,
unless your name is Corey Johnson, you don't want to go.
oh, here's my wife. Yeah. I want to go and I want to see the degrees. I want to hang out, talk some philosophy. And I'm like, baby, listen, grown men are talking. You're going to need to just stay back in the hotel room. And then she drugs me and, ties me up or whatever.
Naked goes in a dumpster.
But I find out, I'm naked in a dumpster. She's gone to all my meetings and stolen all my friends.
But I mean, so we could do a whole episode on that because
the last part of that is true, Robert. She will steal all your friends.
I know. I get everything, but she took my friends.
I think how sexist that is in general, though, about like, oh, we'll have ladies' night, and then all the men will go off and do their secret squirrel stuff, and we'll have a presentation about Eastern Star. And it's just some generic thing all the time.
I can't say that it's always been this like gnarly, totally terrible time. It's just that the official things that they set aside for our ladies to do. Like at this last year at Grand Lodge, I mean, every year I get the program and I open it up and I'm like looking and I go, Corey, do you want to go this year? And she's like, what's the program? And I'm like, well, it's not shopping, brunch, book club, garden tour, and dinner this year. This year it's like all that plus like a presentation from a Jackie Kennedy like impersonator or whatever. And I'm like, she's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, okay. But there was a couple dudes this year from Grand Lodge who were like, yeah, man, we're bringing our ladies. They're going to like take over. They're going to bring wine. They're going to do all this stuff. And I was like, I told my wife and she's like, I might be into that. So, maybe the programming just could get better or, it's not like anything esoteric or explanatory happens in sessions. They could probably go.
That's true. But anyway, Jason, do you know when you'll be going to Masonic Week?
I will probably be going to Masonic Week when Jonathan Thomas Ruark is going to be at Masonic Week.
So I was looking at the agenda tonight, and I will probably be there a little bit on Thursday night to see some of our local councils perform the Royal Ark Mariner degree. And then I will definitely be there Saturday for the Grand Council sessions. As the sitting voting member for our council, I got to represent and sit through all that. So if you don't catch me Thursday night, you'll definitely see me on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll definitely be there on Saturday. And I need to talk to a couple other podcasters who are going to be there because we're firming up some details on maybe doing some on-site podcasting. I think it'd be fun.
But that won't happen on Friday night, because our very own friend of the podcast with his own podcast, Eric Diamond from Ex Oriente, will be the keynote speaker for the Masonic Society dinner Friday night at 6:30. I did not know that.
Yeah, Eric told me about that today. It's going to be incredible. He shared with me a little bit about what he's going to be talking about. I'm not going to disclose it here, but it's awesome.
Darn it. Well, I got to see if I can rework my schedule then. Or just see him Saturday. All right, cool stuff. Next
Ask
up.
him to live stream it.
Ooh, there you go. No reason it can't be. It's open dinner. All Masons and ladies are welcome. Next up, we have something we haven't seen in a very long time. And it's not the Obi-Wan feeling. It is a new article from the Past Bastard. So we thought they went dark. They had started to repost some old articles. But
They started doing that Nick Johnson thing. Got you, Nick.
Oh,
rewind.
pour some water on the burn.
This one looks to be something new. Lodge offers lowest dues in country by switching to a service-based pricing model.
Microtransactions.
It seems to me we talked about like some weird, ways that the lodges could make a buck or whatever.
We did
This was our Demented Dues Design episode.
Oh yeah,
like
that's what
we talked about, like the cruise package lodge where you just pay a lot and then everything's covered, and then we went to the inverse, which is the pay for what you want model.
Right, yeah.
This was ripped off of one of our episodes.
So good. Well, I guess they say, what is it? Something is flattery.
Imitation is the finest form of flattery.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so you too can visit this lodge and get upcharged for an electronic trestle board, a mail trestle board, a coat rack fee, a bathroom usage fee.
Bathroom usage fee on chili night with 700% markup.
You know what was funny? I was kind of tracking some of the comments when this one went up, and the chaplain, the divine blessing fee.
Yeah.
The Tyler's protection fee.
Oh man, so good.
It's like, wait, is it more of an upcharge if he's like concealed carrying, or
I thought the same thing.
the
Is it a real Tyler?
We'd have some great meetings actually if you really want to think about this. There's a charge on here that's pay per talking, and it's like increased if they're annoying.
Where we go?
Is it an
we
automatic?
don't know any brothers who would fall into that category.
Permission to speak in lodge per occurrence, $1.
Okay.
Lodge per occurrence. If the member is irritating, $5.
Oh, that'd be
Plus,
great.
who makes that determination?
I would enact this if I were going to start a new lodge. I'd enact this, and there would be fees if you were going to mention anything about, like, charities or whatever, or lodge events, or like organizing a lodge event. Like, that's where you'd have to pay. But like, discussion for education would be free. So maybe we would get some people talking.
I think there wasn't a big upsell in there for like speaking and making an announcement in lodge if like it's appendant body related. Yeah, that's in there somewhere.
$10.
Yes, you can mention the Royal Arch meeting tomorrow night for $10.
This could actually work.
Yeah, so I do like the blue card idea, as though it's basically a ripoff of, I think, Starbucks, like gold card, where you just put money on the card and swipe it. It's almost like your college like dining card that you swipe at the dining hall.
I think
if kids still do that these days, I don't know.
You can get credit on your blue card if you actually get in line.
The birthday text from the master. That's pretty good. Birthday call from the master, like they use like the call 'em all system. You get the robocall.
The robocalls.
This is worshipful master calling to wish you a happy birthday.
Calling to wish your name here a happy birthday.
It's like you call the number, right? Like it calls you and says, please say your name. I'm like, Robert Johnson. And then it's like, hey, this is worshipful master John Ruar calling to wish. Then my name is being said by me. A happy birthday. So stupid.
Love it.
This one was a good one.
Yeah, it was all right.
We got a lot of usage out of that one. That's funny. All right. And that wraps things up for this week's Masonic News. This has been an interesting topic coming up that Juan kind of re-engaged us with this week. He says, have we done one on the cult of Mithras yet? So we have not. And I know that Robert and Juan have done a lot of research in this, and I've learned a lot over the past week getting ready for the show. So I'm going to hand it off to Robert to kind of give us the historical context, background, and time frame of just what and when was this Mithraic cult and how did it get formed. Take it away, Robert.
All right. So first of all, we have to kind of premise this with a little bit of disclaimer. Not a lot at all is known about the cult of Mithras. We know a lot about Mithra and maybe where this kind of comes from, but we don't know exactly how the mysteries, specifically speaking of like a rite of passage or the usage of, I guess, you said you didn't want to use the word cult, so I'm not going to use the word cult, but
it's fine.
Grouping, the grouping of the word, the cult of Mithras then.
And that's because they took their oaths seriously and they didn't write stuff down.
True story. Yeah, it's true. So what we have is, historically speaking, we have some possible roots that stem from Hinduism. The Mithra character is a slight iteration of the name, and it becomes Mithra. There's some popularity among this because as it travels around, there's not a whole lot of dogma that's attached to this religion. There's no original sin in Mithraism. So because there's not a lot of dogma, I guess it's easier, maybe, but it's different, you know. It's popular. It spreads around. The name Mithra sticks like no matter where it goes, but essentially the face changes with it, and eventually it finds its way in Rome right around 75 CE. So we're looking at like the last quarter of the first century. I said CE, but if AD. And it sticks around until about 300 CE. So it's around for a few hundred years, and it's pretty popular. It's popular with Roman soldiers. It's a men-only organization. But what is interesting is, like I said, the name kind of sticks with this thing, but the face of the organization changes. And you have like this god-type figure of Mithra, who is like a lesser-known deity. And I know John is kind of into the astrology, so I won't go into that bit of it, but he becomes more of a standard deity, a more mature god, and eventually he merges with the sun and creates this being they call Sol Invictus. If that sounds familiar, if you know your Constantine legends, if you know about some of the early Christianized Roman era stories, then you know that Constantine was essentially one of the Roman emperor who brings Christianity, or kind of okays it. His mom is huge into Christianity. She's the one who goes to the Holy Land and unearths the relics, and then founds the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But Constantine is the guy. He practices Mithraism, and basically he later on he takes his image and he calls himself Sol Invictus. He portrays himself as this Mithraic god. Later on, like I said, when he tried to bring Christianity into the mix, it should be noted that he really tried to Christianize the Mithraic tradition as well. So he's out there and he's blending things together. And there's a lot of things within the cult of Mithras, or within the Mithraic ideas or the ideology. I don't want to say dogma, because they really didn't have a whole lot of that. But there's a lot of similar things between Christianity and the Mithras, because there's a lot of blending. There's a mixing of dates. There's a heavy emphasis on the equinox, the solstices, those kind of things, utilizing those dates and rewriting those dates when we needed to kind of Christianize the area. So within all that, it was like the thing. It was the in vogue thing for the Roman soldiers to do. I will say that the mysteries of Eleusis, I think, were probably a really good basis for why Mithras became popular. The mysteries in Eleusis, or the Demeter Persephone morality plays that happened to explain the seasons and things, were in practice from like 1600 BCE and went all the way to 392 CE. The writings about the Eleusinian mysteries say that those originally came from Egypt. And I think that because of the way where the Demeter mysteries, the plays from the mysteries of Eleusis happened, and those were attempted by Emperor Julian in about 360 CE to be brought back into Rome, actually. And from Greece, it failed, it died out. But I think that the Eleusinian mysteries is really what spawned kind of the popularity of the Mithraic cult in Roman society. I don't, claim that as, like fact, but it seems to me that there's definitely some overlap. There's a lot of overlap between Eleusis, Mithras, and Christianity there in that nice window of about 70 BCE to about 365 CE. and Julian was the Emperor Julian in 360 was the last Roman guy to go through the Mithraic, excuse me, the Eleusinian mysteries, which were super popular. Like all of our philosophers all claimed that the Eleusinian mysteries were in fact the mysteries that you would go through if you were anybody. You went through those, and that's why I think it leads into the Mithras cult. Now, as far as practice in the Mithras cult, I'm going to have to hand that off because what is known about it is very, it's not a whole lot. We've put a lot of, I think there's a lot of like conjecture, and many different sources talk about different things. There's different discoveries that have happened over the years, and all we really know is what archaeologists are able to discern from what they found, and which isn't much, as Jason alluded to. They don't write anything down.
Right. So, Juan, tell us about the forms and structure and layout of this various Mithraism.
Well, I want to reiterate what RJ was saying about the lack of evidence for there to be a connection. Of course, some people will comment that this is a stretch. Mithras had nothing to do with Freemasonry, and we've discussed different things here that don't necessarily connect directly to Masonry, but perhaps have some parallels that could be of influence. And we've identified a few in our research. But it's important to keep in mind that there is nothing written that will attest to the actual practices, the ritual, the process that the initiates would go through. Everything is like RJ said, is conjecture, however you pronounce that, conjetura, from what the archaeologists have found. And the evidence in the archaeological side of things is one that will sound familiar to you, and I'll go through some of the items that we found. The Mithraism is constructed to seem as a cave or a cavern. Some of them were actually done inside of actual rock formations, while others were constructed as buildings to look on the inside as caves. The ceiling of the cave would have had openings through which you could see constellations. Perhaps light would come through, and there is another parallel there with our, how do we call that, the celestial canopy that we have in our lodges. The arrangement of the Mithraisms in comparison with our lodges, it's an oblong, what is it? It's a rectangle. So it's a long
one square.
There you go. And so it's a longy, stretchy square upon which you would find at one side its entrance. At its opposite end would be what looks like an altar, and it has usually the depiction of Mithras stabbing the bull with the snake and the dog and the scorpion and all those symbols. At the opposite end, just like you would find either the altar or the east in our lodges. The other thing that the archaeological record shows is that it's very likely that there is a progression in degrees or ranks that the initiates would go through, and these are depicted usually on mosaics in the floor or in the seating arrangement, which, by the way, the seating is on on the long sides of the Mithraism. So you would have a bench or some seating. Let's say if it was oriented east to west, you would have in the south and in the north a row of seating for the members of the cult. What else? There is decoration that relates to constellations and astronomy. No, what is the other one?
astrology.
Astrology, yeah. So some of those symbols are there, and granted, at the time, considering the day, this is what they would consider basically the heavens. There's the observation of the heavens, the formations of the stars, and what the shapes allude to. So you could imagine that there perhaps are lessons that are related to the different astrological signs, but that's just us thinking. What else am I missing anything? There's other things will be mentioned later on as the conversation goes through, but those were some of the parallels that we found, and you can see how people could believe that either the structure of our lodges is inspired by, it could just be inspiration. It could be just an artistic license that some of the founders of the order took in order to create this, knowing that they would have been fond of the various religious practices and philosophical disciplines. So you could see that there is some sort of influence there. Not to say that
Freemasonry predated the cult of Mithras.
Obviously,
came from the ancient Egyptians. Yeah,
correct.
There you go.
Well, the oldest operative Masonic lodge that shows Masonic symbolism was in Pompeii, dated to 70 CE. So, I mean,
I've been
there. Yeah, I didn't go to Pompeii. I went to Herculaneum, but
I've been there.
The oldest lodge. I mean, we're talking about skull imagery. We're talking about a plumb line. We're talking about square, like 70 CE. Yes, it's operative, but it's symbolic in a sense because they're using the symbols and it's the same. So there's something there. And I think that if it was alive and well there's a very real chance that there's, people who know of it, and maybe one influenced the other, or who knows. That's the one thing that we don't know about Masonry, say in 70 CE, or the cult of Mithras, in the first 300 years, or if you're going back to the Eleusinian mysteries, like, we don't know because they were way better at keeping their mouth shut. Or time is a cruel mistress and has just destroyed everything, right? So who knows?
So I think this is an interesting thing that I found in my research. I became fascinated with a lot of the symbolism that Juan started to allude to. So you had this mystery religion / cult, whatever, spread primarily through the Roman Empire from about 100 to 300 AD. Eventually met its demise just through kind of the Christian influence of the Roman era that would really wipe through, and where Mithraic mysteries were formed in a plethora of religions, because every town had its religion at that time. We talked a little bit about Hermeticism and how there was a very syncretic ebb and flow of each town had its own gods and everything. By about the 400s, the Christians kind of came through and cleared that out. But when you look at the iconography that came with that, of these lodges, these Mithraism that still standing today, we see some really interesting sculptures and artwork. And just to begin, some artwork I have here is a common piece of imagery that was kind of like required, like lodge furniture, for every one of these Mithraism, was an image that we've put a new label on called the tauroctony, which basically means the bull killing. And what you see in every single Mithraic lodge is this image of Mithras wearing a tunic, often with a cape, sacrificing a bull, and he's kind of leaning and standing on the bull. And what's very interesting is that it's the same pose no matter where you go. And they found these this Mithraism as far north as London. They found them in Egypt. They found them in Africa. They found them west and east. And they all had this almost identical picture of the bull facing the right, and the way that he's leaning on the bull I find is really interesting too, because he's leaning with his naked left knee holding down the bull, and his right holding down the bull's back leg. And then, as Juan said, there are other adaptations of additional symbols and icons added in: the dog, the snake, a raven, and so forth. We'll talk about those. But this image of Mithras slaying the bull is a common piece of artwork. Now, what that tends to symbolize is that often you'll see the bull, and it's not depicted here, it might be depicted in another one that I have, is the bull will often have a banner or a ribbon hanging over it, which has been known to be determined as a sacrificial ornament. So we know that it's a bull sacrifice, not a machismo, bullfighting, or aggression or hunting thing. You could argue, and other scholars have argued, that Mithras himself represented hunters like Perseus and others, and that could very well be true. But the symbology here is interesting, because if the bull is sacrificial, then that means that it has to mean something else than just food. And so if we take the concept of these underground caves as being microcosms of the universe, then we can now start to add the constellations. Because if we haven't explicitly said it, the majority consensus is that there was a lot of astronomy and astrology applied to the lessons and teachings of the Mithric cult. And so the bull obviously represents Taurus, which, by the way, a lot of this astronomy was already known at the turn of the millennia. And so as it relates to the 7 planets, the 7 classical planets, to include the sun and the moon, you'll see sun and moon iconography, as well as a lot of the constellations in here. The bull representing Taurus being stabbed is part of like a creation myth, and we don't know if that became part of the initiatic experience. But I find it interesting that all of these Mithraism had the same iconography. Therefore, I would transpose it to say, similar to a Masonic lodge today, that was like a trestle board, right, where they all kind of have similar iconography, and we will teach you the lessons of these degrees by walking through this artwork. Therefore, this creation myth of Mithra stabbing the bull can show that this is the creation of the universe. And you'll see, I think you can see it in this picture here, Mithras actually has constellations in his cape. So he's kind of representing the universe as a whole. There are a lot of scholars that will argue over who Mithras actually represents. Is he Orion? Is he Perseus? I find one thing that's kind of interesting too. Let me bring up one of my favorite graphical programs here. This is a program that shows you kind of the stars in the sky.
So before you get into that, this is another interesting adaptation of the Mithraic mysteries. And, yeah,
That's so good. It's so good. Thank you.
The fun fact was never shown with him actually grabbing the bull by the horns. In fact, if horns were shown, they're very small. He would always be pulling back the nose through the nostrils, which I found to be very much more of a different, I don't know, way of killing.
It's much more visceral.
It is. It really is. Yeah. But if you look at kind of where Taurus falls in the night sky and the constellations, this is just the current state of the constellations. I have a program that kind of draws these on. But I find it really fascinating that you'll see constellation Taurus, and immediately on top of it is constellation Perseus.
So yeah, I in the research that I've done, the Mithras constellation is usually attributed to Perseus. Mm-hmm. I would highly doubt that there's any kind of real conjecture that would oppose that.
So, well, actually, there are many scholars that would argue that, and they would say that Mithras represents the sun, but then you also see the sun in other.
So, but the sun, that's later on. Later on, they merge because they have dinner together.
Well, there's a point about the sun too, that the depiction of him holding the bull by the nostrils and stabbing him, he is not looking at the bull as he does this. He is glancing at Sol.
Mhm.
So the way that I interpret that is, I'm doing this in honor of you, or I'm doing this for you. It's almost like, here's your audience. Look what I'm doing for you. And with the nostrils thing, if just think about this. Imagine you had a helmet with horns on them, and you had someone pulling you by those horns. And then, in contrast, someone actually with their fingers in your nose, pulling your head back. You see, like the difference of the intensity and pain and struggle when it comes to that. I think it's illustrated well in the statue. And one detail about the sculpture is that in some depictions where it shows the scorpion, the scorpion at times is striking at the genitals of the bull. And that's the proverbial adding insult to injury.
Right. So let me go back real quickly to a lot of different zodiac symbolism applied to Mithras himself. If you look at the combination of research that's been going on since 1979, a plethora of authors have put Mithras as Leo, as Orion, as Arga, as Perseus, as Betelgeuse, as the sun in Leo, and as the night sky itself, right, with the constellation cape. So there's really no clear iconography, because we've lost the rituals over time, as to what Mithras represents. But we do have some of those other constellations that we talked about. Talking about Leo in particular. Now, if you guys to study any astronomy or astrology, the constellation Leo is a very powerful constellation, very masculine, very full of energy and that kind of thing. And which is really interesting because the grade of Leo was the 5th grade out of 7 grades of the various degrees you would get. And it was written that many of the initiates kind of referred to each other as Leos, right? So it was kind of a common grade, kind of like we treat Master Mason as kind of, that's something that everybody kind of gets. And so if you take that as maybe we are representations of Leo or representations of Mithras in that organization, you could translate that symbolism to who we represent as Master Masons, right, when we get that 3rd degree. Each of these 7 degrees also had a corresponding planet associated to them, starting with Mercury, going to Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Luna, the moon, Sol, the sun, and Saturn. Because remember, at the time, these were only planets that we could see with our naked eye and we could observe and track that way. And so that was really kind of the 7 planetary influences that you had. And if anyone who's studied, alchemy and that kind of stuff, will still see a lot of that symbolism today. 7 chakras, all those shocking correlations. But then the animals themselves also fail. And this is my last point here, is the animals themselves that are found in other versions of the Tauroctony. You'll have things like the sun and the moon, right, for obvious reasons. You'll have the dog, which may represent Canis Minor, Canis Major. The snake, representing constellation Hydra. The raven, representing Corvus. Scorpion, Scorpius. Gemini, with that you'll also see some iconography of 2 twins emerging with the birth of Mithras. Leo, we've talked about, and the cave as the universe. It's really neat too. You'll often see the dog and the snake in the same area, especially lapping up the blood of the sacrificed bull. And the symbolism there is kind of interesting because you have the serpent, who's always been through many myths throughout time, as an enemy, as a counterpart to man. And then you have the canine, which is man's best friend. The duality there, right there, in that sub part of the image, is kind of interesting too. Right there at the birth of the universe from this creation myth. So I thought that was really kind of fascinating to show specifically those two animals sharing or fighting over the same drops of blood from the tauroctomy. So anyway,
I thought what was interesting, you kind of mentioned there, you hit on, John, was not just the idea of the constellation, but the sun in the constellation, which is the main part of astrology. And you had mentioned that perhaps there's a correlation between, the fifth grade, if you will, and Leo, and then looking at perhaps and if it really lines up with planets. And of course, like you said, they utilized Luna, our moon, as one of the celestial bodies, and Saturn being the, maybe the farthest out or whatever. Does that, I wonder, at which way were they going? Was it, in to out? Like, what were the grades? What planet was like the first grade? What planet was the seventh grade? And I'd be curious to know. I mean, if you know some astrology, there are some constellations are directly attributed to certain planets. Like Saturn is, what is it? Not Aquarius, the one before it. It's Capricorn. Capricorn is Saturn. So it's like, I wonder, is there a correlation there? And is Sol Invictus like the top of, is that, top seventh grade, or is that considered outside the grades? It's fascinating. Sorry, just nerding out on what you said.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that shows a lot we could dive into there. But yeah, I don't have that at the ready. So that's a really good question.
I am looking here at the degrees, and when I saw these, I asked myself, like, okay, how do they know, like, that's specifically what it means? Because I have here a table, and of course I'm looking at Wikipedia now, but I've heard it from different sources, some documentaries that I watch and some papers that I read, and they attribute the 7 degrees that are depicted on the floor to Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Luna, Sol, and Saturn. So how they draw that connection, I'm not sure. What I do know is that the 7th one is known as the Father, and so Patera or Mitre. So it seems like the initiates would go through this progression of degrees and eventually be the head of the cell.
Yeah, I saw a lot of similarity there too, with like Pater being like the master equivalent, and then there is even a thing called the Pater de Padres, which is like the father of fathers, meaning it's like kind of the oldest past master in the lodge. Right, that's his role, is to be the elder, even though he's not running the Mithraism. He's there, kind of overseeing everything as the oldest guy.
And another thing that I wanted to mention is that the depiction on the floor in the mosaics, about the ones that are attributed to the degrees, they're depictions of tools. So you'll have the one that has a spade, a lightning bolt, the other one has a sword, a crescent moon, the other one has a torch, a crown, a whip, and the ultimate one has the Phrygian cap, and it has a staff, and what else? A sickle. So you have these different roles, because they look like they're roles for specific people. So it's almost like you becoming those characters as you go through. It'd be awesome if they actually uncovered some sort of old parchment or
Juan, when you said he had a Phrygian cap on, is that what you said?
Yeah.
So that immediately like kind of strikes me, right? When we're talking about like astrology, and you said Phrygian, I was like, yeah, that's Aquarius.
Mm.
Aquarius is literally a representative of a god named Ganymede, who was a young Phrygian character and was scooped up by Jupiter and taken into the heavens to be the immortal cupbearer to the gods.
Look at that. And you do have more incidents of the Phrygian cap. Pretty much all depictions of Mithras in the sculptures fighting the bull, he's always wearing it. And the link that you shared with me of that documentary with the where they're trying to make a link between the cult of Mithras and Constantine's endorsement of Christianity. And one of the cool things in it is that when you look at Constantine's arch and you look at all the different art related to Constantine from the period, it didn't necessarily have Christian iconography. It had people wearing the Phrygian cap and a lot of iconography from other pagan gods of the time. So I don't know how I feel about the connection that man makes in that show. Some of those are like a stretch, but it's interesting to see,
Yeah,
Aliens.
for sure.
It was aliens.
Yeah, every time.
Hey, let's go over to social media because we've got a lot of good movement going on over there. So, Jason, take us there.
All right, let me share my screen real quick and say, back in my day, Pluto was a planet.
Thanks, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Perfect.
We love memes. There was actually a Rick and Morty episode on whether or not Pluto was a planet. It's quite great. So a lot of comments from our friend and brother Donnie tonight. One of the things he said was, of Masonic interest in particular, Mithras is often depicted as emerging fully formed from a stone and carries with him a knife, but also a torch. Stones, light, darkness, and astronomy. It's all very familiar. So Donnie has also shared some links with us. He's been lucky enough to visit the London Mithraism to see the Taroctonies housed at both the British Museum and the Louvre. So you all can hate on him for
Dang.
being able to go see
Donnie.
those in person.
Funny you say
Hate
that.
you.
I was doing some research about that today. And you know who owns that? Michael Bloomberg, right? He was building a location in downtown London, and they came across this Mithraism that had been undiscovered. And this was in the late 50s. And so they did some research, found out they were about to just level it, and found that it was they found the bust of Mithras, and just said, "Oh my gosh, we found another one." It's very rare to find it in London, could do the stretch of the Roman Empire, and so they've restored it, and it's now sitting underneath of one of the Bloomberg buildings.
So Donnie has also just chimed in. He says, artistically speaking, the Phrygian cap is usually seen as a symbol of freedom, which is one reason why it was adopted by rebellions against authority as recently as the French Revolution. Mithras wears a Phrygian cap while slaying the bull. It could be seen as a sign of him overcoming whatever the bull is supposed to symbolize. So, question from not Donnie Dillon, brother Paul Hooton said, he asked the question, was there also a bull sacrificed in the Isis Osiris mysteries? Could the bull be a symbol of the vernal equinox or summer solstice, depending on the time period?
Yeah, so specifically, some versions have the Osiris myth as Osiris being slain by Set as a transfigured bull. Others say that he was just drowned. So that link, I think, is kind of fuzzy. but I'm doing a little research now to see if I can find anything related to the equinoxes.
I think there's definitely some connection there. I think with almost anything even Christian era things have adopted things that relate to the procession. So I would probably say there's a really heavy chance that there's a link there to either equinox or solstice or both. It's just one of those things where almost every ancient religion or cult has it heavily revolves around just the procession. So,
and then kind of rounding things out tonight for social media, we had Brother Mike the intern, who is watching us but not able to join us tonight. He said he found Mithras to be really an interesting figure in the Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart, one of her Merlin trilogy books. And
Is that a comic book reference?
Any of it? So,
Is that a comic book reference? Because otherwise, we're going without one.
I got nothing.
We have a minute.
I have no Mithra comic book. Sorry. Sorry, Mike. I let you down, buddy.
We tried. Trying to throw you a bone there, Mike. Sorry.
I
got nothing.
I gave the dodgeball reference earlier, so I think we're good. Taking the bull by the horns.
Yeah.
By the nostrils. That's a new one.
Ooh.
Only cool kids say that. Is that it, Jason?
Yep.
Rock on.
If taking the bull by the nostrils is cool, then I'm Miles Davis.
Oh, Billy Madison. No milk will ever be our milk.
On that note, Robert Johnson, take us home.
You are correct. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Precisely.
O'Doyle rules. O'Doyle rules, excuse me.
Loved the episode. I know there's some guys out there that were probably like, what in the hell does this have to do with Freemasonry? I think we established that there is a good many parallels that we can draw from some of these things. And it was just a good examination of another system that existed, even though we don't have a whole lot about it, which makes it fun to talk about anyway, because we can just think and make wild guesses to what's going on or what happened in those days. And I think it's fascinating. Like, I learned tonight that Mike Bloomberg owns one in London, and how far do these things reach? And they're everywhere. It's fascinating stuff. And I really appreciate all the work that Juan did in this and everybody else. And especially Donnie Dillon coming at it with some really great things. Maybe we should have had you on the show. The afterthought. Hindsight is 2020, I guess. So thanks for watching. If you guys like Masonic podcasts, I do Whence Came You Sundays at 9:30. One of the projects that I'm working on right now, I could really use your help, is go to wcypodcast.com. I want you to hover over the United States Lodge listing. There is it works best on a computer. It's an Excel-based slicer tool that is basically, I went to all of the Grand Lodge websites and I pulled all of the lists of all of their lodges, their cities that they're in, and everything I could find on their websites and compiled it into a digital form. It's like, I don't want to use the name, but I'll say it's like a lodge listing, but I didn't use that. I went to the websites and got it. And that's why I have a few states missing. So if you look and your state is missing and you have that information, feel free to send it on over and I'll update it. And we can update that yearly. And then we just have that. And it's in your palm of your hand. So check that out. And also, if you're liking Masonic Curators, come on out and do your own Masonic Curator video. Send it on over via like a Google Drive, and we'll get it up on the YouTube channel. So thanks so much for watching. I appreciate everything. Happy New Year. And yep, that's it. Thanks.
Awesome. Juan Sepulveda.
Well, it has been fun. It was very entertaining to find information about it, and see some of the left field shots thrown by by many. But that's all you can do. All you can do is look at what's available and try to come up with something that's somewhat reasonable as to what was happening then. There are, of course, some parallels that we found with Freemasonry. Not to say that one influenced the other, but there are things that we can appreciate just by looking at the comparison and the contrast of these two practices. One of them, of course, might be somewhat self-serving, is the importance of art. Here, you don't have any documents, you don't have any word of mouth accounts, yet you have some artistic depictions of symbols and of the iconography that made these disciplines thrive. And if you have things like that in your lodge, well, your lodge is the better for it. I'm not just saying go to freemasonryart.com and decorate your lodge with it, but if you choose to do that, you got my blessing. No, but the important thing is, like, if you have brothers in your lodge who are artistic, put them to work. Have your lodge pimped out with Masonic iconography, and have a renewed sense of what these symbols that we've been entrusted with. Of course, I'm always grateful for you decorating your lodges and your homes with my art. But the greater point is that you have some artistic interpretation of some of the practices, and they have a very useful purpose. The sculptures that you had in the Mithraisms very well would have served like our trestle boards, or having that decorated environment in which you could ambulate and be reminded of the different lessons. And it's a beautiful thing. There's nothing like walking into a lodge you've never been to before and seeing how it's decorated and having that unique experience. So through the power of the magic of the internet, we get a chance to go to these Mithraisms throughout the old world and kind of like dream what would have been like to be one of them. So hopefully this episode inspired you, motivates you to learn a little bit more. And thank you for participating. I wanted to, because I know he's listening, Brother Jim Gorley, greetings to you. I hope that you enjoyed this show and all the shows. We have a lot of brothers that are on the live chat on YouTube. Have you been on the live chat on YouTube lately? If you haven't, go check it out. You can watch us live. You can see all the illustrations we share on the live taping. Thank you so much, Lee Veltman, David Mazion, Brother, who's the other one? Brother, I think Daniel Fellows. There's a lot of brothers out there who are watching us live. They're giving us some of the questions that we're able to field here in the show, and we invite you to do that. And also smack down some trolls if you come across them while you're at it. Thank you for watching again. And until next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Juan.
My
Jason.
pleasure.
Fantastic episode. I absorbed so much information tonight. It was just awesome. I did do some research on the show, but or on the show topic, but I tell you what, you guys just kind of blew it out of the water, and I just kind of sat back absorbing everything that you were saying. If nothing else, it teaches you that nothing's ever really new, and Masonry has borrowed so much from so many different cultures, societies, ways of life throughout the years. That it's no wonder that we see parallels in Masonic practices, symbolism, initiatic experiences, and the rest of the world, and religious experiences, religious organizations, mystical organizations. It's just because a lot of the symbolism is older than recorded history. And so we, unfortunately, through the limits of historical knowledge, don't really know how deep or how far back that rabbit hole goes. But when we make discoveries like these Mithraisms and even this cult in particular, it gives us insight into the way certain people live and the way certain societies lived, even if they didn't actually write things down. So there's a lot of value to be said in the preservation of these monuments um, and the preservation of the history of these mosaics and statues and frescoes that we're uncovering. So it's awesome. I'm really glad that there's been at least an attempt to um, keep the Mithraisms that are discovered intact, because that's just, again, we lose those and we lose all knowledge that we have of this organization ever having existed. So there's my plug for historical preservation. Travis Simpkins, you can thank me later. But I had a great time with this episode. Really, really interesting topic. We've got some good topics coming up, so stay tuned. And again, February 6th is going to be the big 200, episode 200 for stuck with us for just about 4 years so far. We're not stopping anytime soon, and we are going back to some of the most listener requested topics that we've come up with. For episode 100, it was racism. For episode 200, we've got a lot of guys asking us to finally do a show on the shrine. So we're going to end up doing that for episode 200. So thanks for sticking with us. We have a lot of fun. We hope you do the same. Please give us feedback. Do you like the show? Do you not? What would you change about it? That feedback is helpful, and it helps us adjust and make sure that we're serving you all as friends and brothers the best we can through this show. So with that, I will turn it back over to John.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, I just found so many parallels to Freemasonry. There are too many to count, but a few, just to kind of tie it all together, put a bow on this thing. If you look at an organization of men only who meet in a rectangular lodge room with an altar that is usually covered, in Mithra's case, with bullskin. You have a checkerboard floor with patterns on it describing working tools of the various 7 degrees that cover astronomy, and you have lodge furniture that's in every single lodge that you visit. And to really kind of put a completeness on this thing, I was blown away when I found out that in Greek they refer to each other as syndexioi, which literally translates to united by the handshake. So if we're not united by our handshakes, then we can't be one sacred bond or society. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. I sure did. Go check it out. And if you have any hard questions, ask Donnie Dillon. Thanks for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.